Hello and welcome to another episode of Saturday Morning Nostalgia. So we're now on episode 3 of series 1. The year is 2010. So this year we had 3 products come out in cardboard that I want to sort of talk about. So we're now on the third quarter of the year. If you remember, if you've seen the previous episodes, I'm going through sort of chronologically from 2010. And look, that's just when I really started seriously collecting Magic. So, third quarter, we've got 3 things I want to just talk about on this video. We've got July 17th release of Magic 2011, which was a core set. August 27th release of From the Vault's Relics. September the 3rd release of Duel Decks Elspeth versus Tezzeret. So, the core set, first thing I need to talk about. So, what they started doing with really going forward from 2010 core set was this idea of having half and half. So half of the cards were reprints and half were completely new cards. Previous to 2010, all the core sets had been all reprints. But from 2010 onwards, it's 50-50 up to when finally core sets were sort of got rid of after Origins. So 2011 core set, we have again this 50-50 split, half being new, half being reprints. These came in 15 card booster packs. There was a 16th card in here. The 16th card was either something like a tips and tricks or promotional card or a token. Normally the token had some sort of promo on the back as well. There were also those little 6 card boosters, which I'm sure people have seen me open. 5 intro packs, a fat pack. There was a thing called a land station, and they also had these free sample decks, which were 30 card decks. I'm going to show you the sample decks, but actually I do have a land station from that year. So back when I was getting back into Magic, one of the first things that we did here was myself and my wife played a lot of sealed. Now 2011 was the first set where I had bought a fat pack, and I was a bit short on land. So what I did was I was in a store and I saw this thing called a land station. So this is something they did for a couple of the core sets, I think. I don't know when they stopped doing this. So this is 400 basic land. So this is great if you've got a lot of people doing drafting or playing sealed. And what I've done here, I've put these into these penny sleeves, but there's 4 of each land, and each pack they're all the same land in there. It just means you can sort of break it down for aesthetic reasons and counting as well. So that's why I've done it that way. And they're obviously there's land for all 5 mana, and that was a land station. They're about 20-24 bucks I think for this thing. There's 400 basic lands. Now of course, if you happen to open a lot of Magic product, you don't need one of these. This is and I think originally this was more aimed at a game store where you get people turning up for sealed events and such like, and drafting where they don't have basic land. Of course now I have a ton of basic land, so this becomes rather but it's just nice to have around as a thing if you're ever doing drafting. Okay, so in the set with mechanics, you have so here we have a nice encyclopedia, because I opened a fat pack because I get one of these players guide. So yeah, there was Scry in the set, which was an interesting development with Scry. So this was the first time they ever used what's called a non-evergreen mechanic in a core set. Normally what they do is that in a core set they always have these evergreen mechanics, and they pulled from pretty much all of things. So they didn't have double strike and they didn't have intimidate. So an evergreen mechanic is something like flying. You can normally tell an evergreen mechanic because it doesn't usually have like an explanation against it on there. I don't know if we've got any on here. We'll have a look at some stuff with scry on as we go through some of the other cards. You can see, and this is something going forward, I've separated down my collection now because I have access to the fat pack box. I've got the commons and uncommons in here, and then my rares and foils and mythics are all isolated out into here. Again, with any Magic set, there were a number of cycles. We had, you can see here, there was a cycle of ley lines, one in each colour. So here we've got the ley line of Sanctity, which is the white one. 2 and 2 white. Enchantment, if ley line of Sanctity is in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield. You can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. There was also a cycle of lords, tribal lords at rare. Here's the black one, Captivating Vampire, cares about other vampires, gives them +1/+1, and that's other vampire creatures you control. You tap 5 untapped vampires you control, gain control of target creature. It becomes a vampire in addition to its other types. There was an interesting mill card in the set as well, Traumatise, which comboed off with something else. Don't think it was in. I think it was within the meta, so within the standard game. And I'm just, my mind's gone blank. Actually, there was a black card that this comboed with. So Traumatise, target player puts the top half of his or her library rounded down and into his or her graveyard. The other card, I think, if I'm correct, looked at your contents of your graveyard and then forced your opponent to go through their cards and also discard anything that was already in the graveyard. So you can see how powerful that was. But if I've got that wrong, and if anybody can remember the card, can they put it in the comments? I'm sure it's going to come to me after I've shot the video. Oh yeah, cycle of Planeswalkers, Mythic, 1 in each colour. There was also a cycle of Titans. I don't have any Titans for this particular set. I think all the ones that I got hold of actually came as a result of trading, well, not trading, but redeeming that code that you got for Jewels of the Planeswalker. So there was, white was Sun Titan. What else have we got? Excuse me, I don't know these off the top of my head. Blue was Frost Titan. Black was Grave Titan. Red was the red one? Inferno Titan, I believe. And green. Now green's the one. Isn't green the one that's banned in EDH Commander, I believe? Oh, Primal Titan, that's it. I knew it would come to me. Oh, yeah, also there was this cycle of these charms. So these are the things where whenever a player casts a particular colour spell, in this case Angel's Feather is white, you gain 1 life. And those had become pretty much a feature of the core sets in there. What else was cycled? Looking at my show notes here. Oh yeah, the other thing that they did, and this is this highlights an interesting I don't know if phenomenon's the right word, but obviously when you open packs of Magic cards, if you don't indulge in any necessarily going online and looking at the whole set, and you're just opening packs, depending on the amount of packs you see, you get a different experience of the set. So if you don't open many packs, then you're not going to see many mythics. Now, one thing obviously when they're designing Magic, they want certain key characters to be you to be aware of them, even if you're not opening much stuff. And they have this idea of signature spells, and because they had Planeswalkers, they had these Planeswalker signature spells. So using white as an example, you have Ajani Goldmane at Mythic. So if you're not opening many packs, then you might not see that. But they also had Ajani's Mantra at Common and Ajani's Pridemate at Uncommon. So if you aren't opening many packs, there's quite a good chance that you're going to see that. And they did that for each Planeswalker. So in blue we've got Jace. There was a signature card at each rarity for that. And then in black we had Liliana, and the corresponding ones for that, Chandra. And then in green we have Garruk. And that's not a new thing. That's been a thing in Magic for quite a while. But previously it had been revolving around sort of legendary cards where they'd done that. We saw it in trying to remember the set with the dragons in, like Dromoko and stuff like that. There were also, and I think they were at a lower rarity, so we'll see when we look at the lower rarity cards. There was like a 4-part cycle, so not all the colours, of elemental servants, each representing one of the 4 elements. So earth, air, water, fire. There were also hoses in each colour which hosed other colours. There was a couple of mirrored pairs, Holy Strength and Unholy Strength, and White Knight and Black Knight in there. What else we got here? So just flicking through the rares before we go on to the commons and uncommons. So we got Seera's Ascendant, pretty cool card in EDH Commander, as you can see. As long as you have 30 or more life, Seera's Ascendant gets +5/+1 and has flying. It's a 1/1 normally, but it's only 1 to cast, and it has a lifelink on it. I mentioned Traumatize, I mentioned the Captivating Vampire in the context of Tribal Lords. Royal Assassin was in this particular core set. It's been in other core sets. I think it was in 10th edition. Conundrum Sphinx, Vengeful Archon, Sanctities we mentioned. There's Reverberate in here. Magma Phoenix, Ancient Hellkite. Birds of Paradise was in the set. So flying, tap, add 1 mana of any colour to your mana pool. A nice foil Cultivate there. That's a common. Garruk's in here. There was an ooze in here. Mitotic Slime, 4 and a green for 4/4. When Mitotic Slime is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put 2/2 green ooze creature tokens onto the battlefield. They have, when this creature is put into a graveyard, put 2/1/1 green ooze creature tokens onto the battlefield. Sword of Vengeance, Temple Bell. What I didn't pull was any of the dual lands at rare, so there was this cycle of lands. Let me try and find good. There's Sun Petal Grow. Let's go through to the back of the encyclopedia, it's easier then. Yeah, there we go. So these things, let me just so you can see that. Let's use Dragon Skull Summit as an example. So Dragon Skull Summit enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a swamp or a mountain, and it taps for black or red. And they did that for each of the allied coloured pairs. Good smattering of artifacts in here as well. And there was an interesting combo between Steel Overseer and Triskelion in there. Okay. So let's just put that to one side and talk about, or have a look at, the commons and uncommons. We should be able to zoom in. Okay, let's see what we can find in here. It's going to start falling everywhere. Okay, see how we do here. So let's look in white. So I'm just going to flick through some of these. Okay. So I basically just got these in alphabetical order. Salt Grissings there, just so you can get a feel for what was in here. I did obviously originally, this fat pack was, there is a video on my channel for the unboxing of this. I can't remember what camera I had at the time, so I don't know how good the quality is of the unboxing. Excommunicate, Golden Glow Moth. Pacifism was in this set. Obviously, when you're dealing with a core set, you're going to get some, very cards that are very typical of that particular colour. Interesting thing we had in this was Squadron Hawk. This featured in a pretty important deck at the time. Core Go, I believe it was called. War Priest of Thune, that's pretty cool. Got a enchantment destruction attached to a bear, basically, in white. There's White Knight, that mirrored pair with White Knight, Black Knight. So it's not surprising to see, a lot of flyers in white, so we can build that blue-white flyers deck. I do miss core sets, actually. It's a nice way of, I think, getting into deck building is if you sort of start off with some of the core set artifacts, archetypes, and sort of build the various colour combinations. You can get a pretty good feel for some of the base level colour combination archetypes. As always, there's some lovely artwork in here, with Mana Leak in here. Card draw for Scroll Thief. There was like some mill in this thing, and you'll see when I just open up the starter decks that they were giving away for free. They had these 30 card starter decks, which when you've got a 30 card starter deck, it's not that tricky to have a mill theme. It becomes a lot easier to basically kill your opponent by forcing them to have no library to draw from. Well, there's Black Knight. Child of Night in here, Corrupt, Deathmark, Diabolic Tutor was in here, Disentomb, Doomblade, Duress. There was some cool removal in this particular set. Oh, there's our signature Liliana cards. Mind Rots. Sign in Blood. You got how basically black does card draw. There's our Unholy Strength. And just through some red stuff. Oh, there's Chandra's signature cards. Demolish. Oh, there we go. Good old lightning bolt. I think this was in both M10 and M11. Pyretic Ritual. So mana ramp for red, if you can call it that. In green. our cultivates. Giant spider was still in the core set at this point. There's a good old Land of War elves. Naturalize. So you know, if you've been playing Magic quite a lot over the years, you'll see there's lots of sort of classic Magic cards in here. And of course, with the cards in here that were new, you know, the half of the set that was new, would then, of course, subsequently may have been reprinted in later sets as well. So here we have the these sort of lucky charms. So there's you can see there's the white one, there's the red one, the blue one. Got a voltaic key was in the set, and there's the green one. And then at the lower rarity, in terms of non-basic lands, there was good old Terramorphic Expanse. So that's the sort of commons and uncommons. Gives you some idea of, you know, what if you open like I did, like 10 to 12 packs. Yeah, that's the sort of stuff you might see. I think possibly I opened slightly more in the set. Now I mentioned these decks, which were these 30 card free sample decks that you could sort of get. They gave out to new players. So this just gives you, I'll quickly go through these, I won't spend a lot of time on them. So you can sort of get a feel. There were no rares in these, it was all commons and uncommons, and what they did is they had them from both M11 and stuff that was currently legal in standard. Generally here we're seeing stuff from this particular white deck, we see some stuff from Zendikar. So this came out basically to get people into Magic. They're 30 cards. You know, you've got sort of Journey to Nowhere's in here, and is there? Just trying to see if it's in here. Oh, maybe not. Okay. Yeah, so I thought there was another sort of classic white card in there, but definitely Journey to Nowhere in there. So this was the blue one. This had a mill theme. To it. Not going through in colour order here. So green, we've got some pump stuff, you know, large creatures, fog effect, spider, ramp. So what it's doing is it's getting people again familiar with some classic concepts within within each colour without making things too complicated for a starting player. Like I can imagine if you made like the blue deck very like a hard to play control deck, that would be quite tricky for a new player. So they're going for things like, you know, card draw and mill as an introduction to blue. Although there were counter spells in there, it's not like a, you know, the sort of controlled, you know, mono blue control deck that you would find in a, you know, like a non-beginner's deck. So with red, what we're seeing is burn in here. Basically damage, direct damage, and small hasty creatures. And then finally, I can get this out. move on to black. Looks like they're going for more of a tribal thing in black with vampires, so it's like tribal vampire. There's some lifelink. So yeah, each one just highlighted a particular aspect of that colour, but made it so that the mechanism of play wasn't too complicated for anybody that was sort of starting out in Magic. You've got, you know, 30 card decks like I've mentioned, so in blue it makes things like milling more likely to work, whereas that might not be such a achievable objective in with larger size decks. Oops. Okay, so what else was there? Well, there was the intro. There was 5 intro decks in here. I just bought 2, which I tended to do at the time, which is I would just buy the 2 that really sort of appealed to me. The 5 that they had were a white-black Blades of Victory, white-blue Power of Prophecy, like a Flyers deck, black-green Reign of Vampirism, blue-red Breath of Fire, and red-green Stampede of Beasts. This is the Stampede of Beast deck. So you have classic red-green aggro deck with you know, a way of basically having very large creatures and pumping them in various ways, having card draw. There's some, I think there's some fog effects in here. Trample, enchantment, destruction, fireballs in here. You got shroud. Land of War Elves is going to give you mana. There's a bear. Again, if you're fairly familiar with concepts of like red green, then you can sort of see where this deck is going. There's lightning bolts. There's lots of like 1-ofs and 2-ofs in these sort of intro decks. What they're going for generally is high variance with these decks. So when you're playing them, particularly with again beginners, you're getting a good idea of a multitude of card interactions that are going on. You'll notice also they had a lead card which was in foil here. But like I said, only 2 rares in here. You don't get as high a rare count as say you do with a product like the Duel decks. So the other one I got was the blue-white Flyers. Had Conundrum Sphinx as the lead card in foil. Had Stormtide Leviathan with Island Walk on it. Wall of Frost. There's one of our elements, our Water Servant, our Air Servant. Condemn. Some Sleep. So there's some control in here. Some Scry. More Scry. Actually going to see what this is. Are there often? So fair smattering of Flyers. So with the blue-white Flyers deck, it's always interesting how you sort of achieve that, because with a lot of sort of useful Flyers, the cost might be slightly higher. So what you have to think about is with blue-white Flyers, what are you going to do while you're trying to develop your board of Flyers? And if they're fairly higher cost, there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can have sort of low cost white weenie type creatures to basically gum up the board and act as chump blockers whilst you're, you know, basically developing your Flyers. The other way is to have quite a bit of control, to have a sort of blue-white control element in there as well. So you can sort of see that's going on in that deck. So that was our just a quick look at, well, not so quick look at the core set. The other thing that came out that year, and unfortunately I don't have the full product for this. For other From the Vaults I do, but I've got hold of just 3 cards from that, just so you can see this. So this came out August 27th. If you bought the full box, it was priced at $34.99, but I suspect hardly anybody probably paid that price for this. The prices on these from the vault, they're like low print runs. The prices go up almost straight away, and it's quite hard, unless you've got a super nice local game store. It's quite hard to actually get these at MSRP or MRSP, however you say it. So what I just did as an example, I just tracked down 3 of these, so you could just see the holographic foil on this, what it looks like. You can see that comes out sort of really well on camera actually. The other thing with these aren't too bad, and I did a video about this one time. With this slightly different foil, we all know that foils will bend based on moisture levels, and with these particular ones, these can bend real badly. It'd be interesting actually when I open my box version of some of these from the vaults, which I do have. I had about 3 of some of the other ones that were easy to get hold of. I suspect they've probably bent quite badly. These aren't too bad. So what they did with this set, it was the 3rd from the vaults, came out August 27th, $34.99. There were 15 artifact cards. It was all based around artifacts. There was a spin down counter, and they were all these holographic foil cards. They had the new style borders on them, even though they were old, like reprints of older cards that were, a lot of these cards that were like modern borders. 9 have new artwork. So the 3 I've got here, the ones that have got the new artwork, are the Black Vise and the Zoran Orb, basically. Again, you can see this rather nice foiling there. It's coming out really good on camera. Mirari, I understand, was older artwork. I think that's right. Have I got there? Yeah, I think that's correct. So just to go through the 15, so the 9 that had new artwork: Ether Vial, Black Vice, which you've seen, Icecrown Scepter, Ivory Tower, Mastercore, Mox Diamond, Neverall's Disc, Soul Ring, and Zoran Orb. There were 6 with older artwork. They were Justice Cat, Khan Silver Golem, Mirari, which is that one, Memory Jar, Sundering Titan, Sword of Body and Mind. So that was the From the Vault offering of Relics, From the Vault Relics, August 27th. Okay, so last thing I want to just show you, the dual decks from that year, Elspeth versus Tezzeret. So I suppose a white soldiers deck versus artifacts. So this is the nice thing I like about dual decks, and they probably are my favourite sealed product because they pull from Magic's history. You get a nice smattering of rares, you get cards from all over Magic's history. It gives you a list of where they're reprinted from, so you can track the sets down if you're interested in sort of exploring the design space of a particular set for whatever reason. Maybe you're using this to inspire you to build other sort of decks in other formats in Magic. You sometimes get some interesting lands crop up. Certainly some very cool cards. Source to Plowshares was in here, Journey to Nowhere. And also, I always find that with these decks, they don't always do it, but they're sort of almost like softening you up in some respect for an upcoming set. So we had the Tezzeret deck, and of course artifacts were going to be a thing in Scars of Mirrodin, because we went back to the Mirrodin plane. And so what they will often do is they'll put in not only new artwork, but sometimes you will get a card from like an upcoming set. Not always, but that will sometimes sort of crop up. And also you'll get, if it's, if this deck is like foreshadowing things that are coming, a set that's coming out, what they'll often do is put in cards from the set which is in the same plane. So if that new set that's coming out is a return to a particular plane, then you might see in that previously released Duel deck some of those cards from that plane. So we've got Elspeth versus Tezzeret. I find the alternative falling is pretty nice. What they did with this generates tokens, this deck. So we got 3 tokens. It's a mono white deck. Let me just move to the thing here. So what you've got here is some lands which are, you know, story relevant. You can see there's some mirrored in lands here. Looks like there's lands from other sets in Magic's history that have been reprinted there. So our foil with the new artwork is Elspeth Knight Errant. That's at Mythic. And we've got our rares, Loyal Sentry, Crusade. White creatures get +1/+1. Catapult Master, Angel of Salvation. And then we move on to our uncommons in here. Elite Vanguard, Core Aeronaut. You can see there's lots of one-offs here. Again, we're looking for high variability in these products, so they sort of, you can play them over and over again, and every time you play them you're going to get a slightly different experience, but some interesting synergies going on as well. Seasoned Marshal, Conclave Phalanx, Stormfront Riders, there's the Swords to Plowshares, Journey to Nowhere. So these are our uncommons: Raise the Alarm, Razor Barrier, Blinding Beam. There you can see, so it's basically a, you know, it's sort of what you would call, I suppose, a soldier's deck with the appropriate amount of things like white removal in here as well, and then some interesting non-basic lands. Rustic Klakan, I think that is a Klachan. So these were these tribal based land decks where, you know, if you revealed a certain tribe of card from your hand, it would come into play untapped. Darien Camp is here again, cares about soldiers. And Kabira Crossroads, which basically, when it enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life. So you've got some sort of life gain there. And then Elspeth versus Tezzeret. So the Tezzeret deck was an artifact deck. I cared about artifacts again, just quickly. So you can see we've got land from the original, some of the land here from the original Mirrodin. They very much choose the land to reflect the, you know, part of the stories of the background story of the Planeswalkers and the planes that they come from or have visited, or part of their major storyline revolves around. So you've got Tezzeret the Seeker, there's the Steel Overseer. So these are our rares: Master of Ethereum, Razormane, Masticore, Triskelion. As they mentioned in the M11 booklet, there's an interaction between Steel Overseer where it puts +1/+1 counters on each artifact creature you can control, and Triskelion, which has counters on it which you can use to deal 1 damage. So you can see how that might be relevant when it's going up with a white deck where there might be smaller creatures. Pentavus is in here as a rare, and moving on to uncommons: Ruined Servitors, a couple of those, Assembly Worker, Serrated Biscelion, Espirizoa, artifact creature Jellyfish. So ton of artifact creatures in here. Synod Centurion, Clockwork Hydra, non-artifact creature in the form of Quimalox, but it has affinity for artifacts. Everflowing Chalice, a couple of those. Elixir of Immortality, Contagion Clasp, Energy Chamber, Trip Noose. And moving on to some blue non-creature spells: Thirst for Knowledge, Argivian Restoration, Foil, Steel Wall, Arcbound. So loads of classic stuff in here: Trinket Mage, Clockwork Condor, Frogmate, Fairy Mechanist, Ether Spellbomb, Echoing Truth, Moonglove Extract, Thoughtcast, Mishra's Factory is in here, Stalking Stones, Darksteel Citadel, and see at the Synod. So you can see how that very much cares about artifacts. So there we have it. That's the Elspeth versus Tezzeret, which was the duel that came out in that quarter. That came out, when was it? September the 3rd, that one. And that's the last thing I really need to talk about. That came out 1999. The Elspeth deck was mono white, the Tezzeret was mono blue. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.